and throttle up.
Discovery Rocket, go for deploy.
H2 and everybody in the shuttle program, the crew is go for launch.
Roger, nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Good afternoon. I'm Megan Cruz with NASA's Office of Communications, and welcome to Kennedy Space Center on the Space Coast of Florida, where we are once again poised to make history. This time with NASA's Boeing crew flight tests set to lift off on a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station's Launch Complex 41 on Monday, May 6th at 10:34 p.m. Eastern Time. NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams will be the first to fly on Boeing's Starliner, making this only the sixth time NASA has flown a new crew transportation spacecraft. And here to speak with all of you about the recently completed launch readiness review, as well as any other updates we have on the mission, are leaders from NASA, Boeing, and ULA, also a launch weather officer from the 45th Weather Squadron. So let me introduce them to you now. No stranger over here, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson. Then we have Steve Stitch, Manager, NASA's Commercial Crew Program. Then joining us virtually from Houston, Dana Weigel, Manager, NASA's International Space Station Program. Back here on the dais, we have Jennifer Buckley, Chief Scientist, NASA's International Space Station Program. Mark Nappy, Vice President and Program Manager, Commercial Crew Program from Boeing. And then Gary Wentz, Vice President, Government and Commercial Programs over at ULA. And then Brian Cizik, Launch Weather Officer, 45th Weather Squadron, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Now, each will give brief opening remarks, and then we'll open questions from here in the room as well as on the phone. If you're here in the room, please wait for a microphone to come to you. And then if you're on the phone, you can get into the question queue by pressing *1. Just a reminder, please ask one question and try to keep your questions to today's mission that we're talking about. All right, Administrator, go ahead.
Thank you, Megan. This is a test flight that brings to bear all the things that the title implies. We're testing the vehicle for, in this case, the first time with humans on board. Megan said this has been done 6 times before. So you think of it. The first time humans have flown on a new spacecraft. Started with Mercury, then with Gemini, then with Apollo, the Space Shuttle, then Dragon, and now Starliner. And come next year, it will be the first time that a crew will climb on and will launch on the Orion spacecraft, which will take us around the moon. Because it is a test flight, we give extra attention. They're checking out a lot of the systems, the life support, the manual control, all of those things that you want to be checked out. That's why we put 2 test pilots on board. And of course, the resumes of Butch and Sunny are extensive. The other thing to comment about this flight is this is all a part of our commercial activities. So you've already seen commercial crew and cargo to orbit with the Dragon and other cargo vehicles. This will give us that additional capability because we always look for a backup. That's why, if you remember, in the competitions on the spacecraft to be the lander on the moon, NASA had awarded only 1, and we insisted that we go to a second competition for a second lander. That's the importance of having 2 to give you the robust capability of carrying out the mission. And from NASA's point of view, it's a fixed price contract. And we share in the development costs, but then the operation is a fixed price contract. We're doing that as we go to the moon as well. And so we are going to have a whole new adventure. This is very much a part of our exploration of space in what I call the golden age of space exploration. And think about it, since we're going to keep the International Space Station going for another 6 years to deorbit in 2031, think about these spacecraft. They will be able then to service the to and from to the commercial space stations, which we expect to have on orbit by the time we are deorbiting the International Space Station. So it is a historical day. It's a wonderful day. Oh, by the way, one other historical fact. This is the first time since Apollo 7 launch that a human astronaut launch is actually on what used to be the Air Force, Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and now is, of course, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Megan?
Great reminder, yes. All these firsts and milestones that we're meeting today with this flight test. Okay, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Megan, and thank all of you for being here. Thanks for your interest in our human spaceflight programs at NASA. It's been a busy time since we last talked after the flight test readiness review. That Friday after the review, the crew got into the vehicle, and you heard from Butch and Sonny, did a mission dress rehearsal. They were extremely pleased with the vehicle. We checked out the spacecraft, checked out the whole process of getting in and getting suited up and doing comm checks. That all went really well. Have a few things to move around in the cockpit based on Butch and Sonny's input, but that went extraordinarily well. We had a couple of items we talked about at that press event after the flight test readiness review that we've closed out. We did some analysis of the forward heat shield separation of Starliner, and that was closed out. We have good flight rationale to go should even one of those parachutes that pull that forward heat shield off not work properly. We have good flight rationale on that. And then there was one valve at the pad that Gary and the ULA team were working on, and that's been swapped out, and we're good to go there. I just got back from Complex 41 this morning. It was really exciting to be out there for me, thinking about flying Butch and Sonny on Starliner and the Atlas just in a few days. It was great to see the team and everybody's excitement proceeding toward launch. We had the launch readiness review, and everyone pulled go to proceed. And Gary and Mark will talk about the timeline of rolling out to the pad and getting the vehicle finally ready for flight. As Megan said, the launch time on May 6th is 10:34 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, we've got to have good weather and the vehicle's all checked out, but we'll work through that step by step. And then we plan to dock about 26 and a half hours later on Wednesday early in the morning at 12:46 a.m. Eastern time. It's about a 26 and a half hour rendezvous. The most exciting thing for me about the launch readiness review was at the very end. We heard from Butch and Sonny, and they talked about their excitement. And after everybody had pulled go, Butch got on and wanted to say one thing to the team, and he said he's go for launch. And so it is a super exciting time in Commercial Crew. You know, the LRR is one of the last major milestones. We'll have a Starliner mission management team on Saturday to review a couple final items and talk through the weather, but I don't see any big items coming up there. You know, it's been a busy time, and for me, it's exciting to bring Starliner and the ULA Atlas launch vehicle online. We have been striving, Commercial Crew, to have two independent space transportation systems. That's been our goal from Commercial Crew's inception, and we're very close to reaching that goal with the planned launch on Monday. We did a port relocation, and Dana Weigel will talk more about that, but we moved Dragon on orbit to get the port ready, and that's all ready to go. So overall, things are looking good for launch. I know the crew on orbit is excited as well. Mike, Matt, Jeanette, and Alexander about having Butch and Sonny on board. We'll take it one step at a time, work our way through the events over the next few days, and when we're ready, we'll launch hopefully on Monday. It's important that we're making history. I feel that a lot as the commercial crew program manager. It was just 4 years ago we brought the Dragon spacecraft online and the Falcon 9 launch vehicle, and here we are now 4 years later bringing another system online. So we've been taking our time to go through everything methodically because it is a test flight and we want it to go well. I'm sure we'll learn something on orbit and learn something during the flight, but our team is double checking everything and making sure we're really ready to go. So I want to thank our entire team on the commercial crew program within NASA, the Boeing team, our international partners, United Launch Alliance. It's been a lot of work to get here. We have a little bit more work to go. We're going to take it one step at a time, and we'll launch when we're ready. And back over to you, Megan.
Steve, thank you so much. Dana, over in Houston again, joining us virtually.
All right, thank you all for joining us today to hear more about this historic mission. This is a really critical milestone for the agency, for commercial crew, for ISS, and also for our international partners who will one day fly aboard the Starliner vehicle. You've heard it mentioned, but just to reemphasize, having two different U.S. crewed vehicles that can travel and take crew to ISS is really important for us. It helps us with any number of different off-nominal scenarios that we could encounter. And so this crewed flight test is a critical stepping stone to reach that broader goal. Steve mentioned it, but on orbit yesterday, Crew 8 got into their Crew Dragon vehicle and they relocated their spacecraft from the Node 2 Harmony forward port to the Node 2 Zenith port. That frees up that forward port for the Starliner vehicle. Just this morning, the ISS mission management team convened to review our readiness for CFT. Everyone polled go. We only have a couple open items on board. We've got an inspection using the robotic arm of that Node 2 forward docking port, and then we've got to go put the arm in a stowed location. We'll finish that this evening. We're not working any other issues related to the mission, so everything continues to go very smoothly on board ISS. Once Starliner's in free flight, the ISS team will follow along with the performance of the spacecraft. We'll do that evaluation along with the commercial crew and Boeing teams. And then on Tuesday afternoon, evening, we'll have another ISS mission management team to review the overall spacecraft performance and to give the final go for integrated operations and docking. Once Butch and Sonny are on board, they'll be there for a little bit over a week. Their primary activities that week are focused on Starliner itself. They'll put it through its paces. They'll look at configuration of the emergency equipment in their spacecraft. They'll also do some other activities that will verify operations that we will ultimately need for some of the longer duration missions. To recap some of the other things that have gone on with ISS, a little over a week ago, Roscosmos did a spacewalk. They deployed some payloads and some external hardware outside ISS. Then last Sunday, we had the undocking of the SpaceX 30 cargo mission. About a day and a half later, that successfully splashed down. SpaceX 30 was carrying about 4,000 pounds of research and scientific investigations back to Earth. We're very much looking forward to this crewed flight test. We're excited to have Butch and Sonny on board. And we're really happy that we're making great progress towards our overall goal of having 2 U.S. crewed providers. And with that, I'll hand it back to Megan.
Dana, thank you so much. And, we're talking about having a robust commercial crew program. That'll obviously have an impact on the station, right, Jennifer?
So more crew means more science. So we could not do the science that we do on the International Space Station without it being enabled by the crew. To date, we've done almost 4,000 investigations and serving over 5,000 researchers. The crew is dedicated to conducting the science on ISS, as well as participating in the science themselves. So on this particular mission, the crew members will be part of 2 human research studies and will be carrying hardware on the vehicle to enable another human research study for our international partners, the European Space Agency. The crew is going to be participating in a study called Pilot Egress Fitness. So as we look at going back to the moon and onto Mars, it's really important for us to understand the physiological impacts of spaceflight on crew members, especially as we look at them entering a partial gravity environment. So when will they be able to egress the vehicle? What type of tasks will they be able to do? And this will really feed heavily into the architecture of the missions that we plan, as well as seeing how we can support the crew. Do we need countermeasures? How can we best make them successful on the surface? So after exiting the vehicle, they will do a series of studies and tests where they traverse a ladder. Eventually, this test will evolve into where the crew will do suited EVAs. We're not going to do that for this particular flight. And then we're going to overlay that with their bone and muscle data that we've collected pre and post flight to take a look at their performance. The other investigation they're participating in is a spacecraft occupancy risk. This is where we're going to be looking at the forces experienced by crew to help us build better models of what those forces look like for both reentry as well as landing. This is very similar to what's done in the auto industry. We're going to be collecting data pre and post flight on the crew, on their physiology, as well as taking a look at things like seat accelerometers, video collected, and even surveys on the crew members' experience. And then finally, the crew is going to be bringing up hardware to support a European Space Agency investigation called Immunity Assay. This is going to be looking at crew members' response and how we see change to the spaceflight environment and their immune system. So in particular, their white blood cells. This one's really interesting because before we've always had to return those samples to the ground, and now we're going to be able to analyze them on board.
Thank you so much. Again, a reminder that this is a test flight of so many different things, not just the vehicle, not just the spacecraft, but also our astronauts as well. Okay, Mark.
All right, thanks everybody for being here today. Today we had the last of a pretty long list of reviews that led up to this, and today's was just like all the rest, and it showed how well aligned and how ready we are for this mission. As of last night, we had 0 constraints to launch. And really all we are looking forward to now is the work that we have to do this weekend to get ready for Monday. That includes, of course, rolling tomorrow to the pad, configuring the spacecraft for launch. So to do that, we'll open the hatch. We'll do some final cargo and configuration for crew ingress. And then we'll do some power up and some health checks to make sure the vehicle's performing properly. Then we go right into launch ops and lead us up to Monday night. We'll have an L-2 day on Saturday, and if necessary, an L-1 day on Sunday. And really the purpose of those meetings is just to make sure the team is got everything they need, review the weather, and just address anything that may come up over those last 2 days. Last thing I'll talk about is really the team's readiness. And boy, I couldn't be more proud of this team. We came back after the holiday, and we had planned to be ready on March 1st. Knowing that our window was sometime in March, April, May, we said, let's just be ready for whenever the International Space Station can accept us. And so we came back after the first of the year, and we had a safety check-in. And we talked to the team, we said, and Butch and Sonny came over and shared some of their experiences and told them how excited they were about what was ahead of us. Told the team at that point, we don't have to hit the ground running. Let's just start slow, let's build momentum, and let's peak at the right time. And that's exactly what they've done. We're at peak performance right now. And we're really looking forward to executing this weekend, executing a launch, and executing the mission in the same way that we got here. So thanks to Steve, thanks to Gary, we're ready to go.
Thank you, Mark. Gary.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for participating, tuning in online for this. We're really honored to be prepping for this crewed flight test and to initiate Sonny and Butch's journey to the space station. There's some history surrounding this mission. So back in 1962, John Glenn flew on the first Atlas, and coincidentally, 62 years later, we're flying our 100th Atlas with Butch and Sonny on board. And so that's very significant for our team. When you You look at our team, we've been highly focused on the safety of the vehicle, the safety of the payload, as well as Butch and Sonny, keeping in our minds them, their families, and the needs of the nation to be able to support this second crewed flight vehicle to space station. Butch and Sonny have spent a lot of time in our facilities interacting with every employee within the ULA team, and they've become part of our family as we've moved forward. You know, we see them on a regular basis. They refer to the hardware as their hardware. And it's really means a lot to our entire team to see them, to have them on the call this morning and addressing the team about their readiness and their confidence and our ability to get them to orbit. And so that's extremely exciting, and we're just honored to be playing this part of the mission. For this, we designed 2 different technologies to support human spaceflight. We put an emergency detection system on board that monitors all the vehicle systems, and in the event that we had an off-nominal performance of one of those systems and it required the crew to perform a abort, this will actually automatically trigger that abort. So we monitor those systems and pay close attention to that, as well as designing a dual-engine Centaur, which is really bringing it back from a heritage vehicle that we flew previously and what we're flying in the future. So Vulcan Centaur is also a dual-engine Centaur. So we have that specifically for this mission as well. Going forward, you know, we also have a ascent team that's focused specifically on monitoring the vehicle systems, communicating with our flight operations team in Houston, and relaying that information to the crew throughout the mission. So the team is wholly focused around the crew and crew safety, and really appreciates the partnership and confidence of both Boeing, NASA, and the flight crew to fly on board the Atlas V. Like has been mentioned, the vehicle is very clean. This is one of the cleanest flows that we've had. It's been a pleasure to come to the different flight test readiness reviews, the flight readiness reviews, and not have issues to talk about. We had some minor things that we've worked through, some experiences with coming right after a Vulcan flight into an Atlas, and so we've updated our systems for that transition to be able to continue flying Atlas and Vulcan for the next couple years. So with that, we'll continue to watch through launch as well as landing and recovery of the crew and the vehicle before we deem mission success, but everything's looking great and looking forward to roll tomorrow. With that, Megan.
That sounds all great, Gary. Thank you. And now, Brian, the weather really couldn't be any better, huh?
Yeah, you know, it's generally a pretty good sign when the weather guy has a smile on his face. So happy to bring some pretty good news here. Before I start, I want to acknowledge Dr. Brian Belson. He's leading the launch weather team for this mission that I'm filling in for today, and he's working hard on a lot of these forecasts. But yeah, as I alluded to, the weather looks very favorable here at the launch site for the Monday evening launch attempt. We are still a few weeks away from our summer thunderstorm season here in East Central Florida. And although we are in a bit of a summer-like pattern with an Atlantic ridge of high pressure in control, we don't have the moisture and instability that we might have in a June, July, August. So that will help really limit the amount of showers that are able to develop with the afternoon heating. So on Monday, we expect some light onshore southeasterly flow to start the day. That will help the sea breeze push inland and farther to the west. So any showers that do develop will be out to the west. And then as we get later in the afternoon, into the evening hours, and then after sunset, we'll start to see any of that shower activity begin to die off as we head closer and closer to T0. So overall, the weather does look very favorable here at the launch site. Our official launch forecast as of right now, if we could bring that up, that's a 5% probability of violation, so a 95% chance of go here at the launch site. I do want to caveat and say we also work very closely with the Spaceflight Meteorology Group out in Houston that's led by Tim Gardner. And being a crewed launch, there are some additional weather considerations that the entire team is looking at specifically for crew safety. So they're looking at weather all along the ascent corridor to make sure that we are good to go for launch. So we'll be monitoring that very closely. This percent go here does just encapsulate the weather here at the launch site, and we monitor for a set of rules called the Lighting Launch Commit criteria that are designed to protect not just against natural lighting, but rocket-triggered lighting. A rocket can actually trigger a lightning strike that would not have naturally occurred. And then as we go to the backup day, in the event that we do have to use the next launch window, weather looks equally as good. Again, a 95% chance of go. But if Mother Nature does throw a curveball at us, the launch weather team will be on console and watching very closely, and we will be ready to go. So, Megan, back to you.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming and smiling today. We really appreciate it. All right, so let's head on with the questions. We'll start here in the room. I saw Marcia has 2 hands up. Let's start with you.
I can't decide which hand. Marcia Dunn, Associated Press for Mr. Nelson. What personal assurances have you gotten from Boeing that the safety issues on the airplane side have not spilled over into the spacecraft side? And have you talked directly to Dave Calhoun about any of this?
I've talked to Dave Calhoun many times, not most recently since the aircraft division of Boeing has had the most recent problems with those bolts on the panel falling out. But Dave Calhoun, when I first met him, he introduced me to his new head of Boeing Defense and Space. And he said, this guy is a good one. And he said he is going to make sure that everything is working in that defense and space sector, which includes the Starliner. And my interpretation and observation is just like has been reported to you today, that they have done it without a hitch, that this is a clean spaceship and it's ready to launch. And I can tell you from NASA's point of view, we don't launch until it's ready.
Thank you, Marcia. Over here.
Jeff Faust of Space News. For Gary, besides the emergency detection system and the dual-engine Centaur, is there anything different about this Atlas V from other previous Atlas Vs? Is there hardware or procedures, anything that might account for, as you said, the very clean flow leading up to this launch?
No, other than the emergency detection system and the dual-engine Centaur, the vehicle is pretty much a standard Atlas V vehicle. Goes through the same standard procedures and processes. The only other significant difference is it doesn't have a payload fairing. Instead, we have, as you've seen twice previously, a capsule with an aero skirt sitting on top, and that's all been flight proven and checked out. So we're very comfortable going forward.
Great. We'll take a few more in the room here before going to the phones. James over here in the end.
Thanks, Megan. Hey, everyone. I'm James, our local reporter at Channel 6. For Mark, I was wondering, is the source of your confidence working through all the delays over the last few years? Has overcoming that adversity brought you to this point where you feel as prepared as possible? Thank you.
Well, you know, we go through a pretty rigorous process to get here. And really where my source of confidence comes from is going through that process and getting the alignment that I talked about earlier. We work very closely with NASA, with everything we do from the factory floor to the software to all of our engineering design and our certification products. And we've come to the point where we are all in total agreement. You can't be more confident than that.
Okay. And we have Will over here in the back. And while we're getting the microphone to him, again, just to remind those on the phone, to get into the question queue, hit *1.
Hi, Will Robinson Smith with Spaceflight Now. Thanks so much for taking the time, to all of you. Question for Gary. A couple of years ago, before OFT2, you were asked about the process and the progress towards human rating the Vulcan rocket. In that time, have there been any updates towards that? And, what are you looking at with this mission and the successive next 6 flights of Starliner with Atlas that may help inform human rating Vulcan with Starliner? Thanks.
So as we move forward with Vulcan and human rating, we're continuing to do different studies. A lot of the hardware is common. The entire avionics suite is common, and so there's a lot of capability that we have designed into Vulcan moving forward. And as we work with Boeing and other customers on human rating, we're looking forward to the opportunity to fly Vulcan as well with humans on board.
All right, let's go to the phones now. We have Jonathan with Fox News. Jonathan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thanks so much for taking my question. Jonathan Seri with Fox News. My question is about backup launch dates. I believe you said it was May 7, 10, and 11. I'm wondering what times of day are you looking at for each of those dates? Thank you.
Yeah, this is Steve Stitch. I can provide those. The first backup opportunity, if we scrub on Monday, would be Tuesday. May 7th, launch would be 10:11 p.m. Eastern Time. And then I don't have the time for the 10th, but we do have the 10th and the 11th, and we can get those times for you.
I do have the May 10th if you'd like to do that. It's May 10th at 9 p.m. and then May 11th at 8:38 p.m., all Eastern Time.
Yeah, thanks, Megan.
Yeah, of course. Okay, we also have Joey Roulette on the phone.
Hi, thanks, Joey Roulette with Reuters. I have one question this time for Dana, Mark, or whoever else wants to answer. What items will the astronauts and ground teams be monitoring during the mission, throughout launch, while it's docked, and during the return? Items that might require redesign for long-duration missions. Like, for example, the batteries on Starliner are believed to be fine for this short-term stay, but they might not be fine for a long-duration stay. Will those and will anything else be examined like that during the mission? Thanks.
I'll start. Well, first of all, it's been said this is a test flight, so all of the spacecraft systems are going to be monitored, and there's really nothing particular that we're going to be looking at that we know today we want to change. We have some things like the batteries that we are working to potentially modify and upgrade. We're really going to depend on the flight test objectives to give us feedback on is there anything that needs to be changed with the vehicle. Remember, we talked about the purpose of this mission is to last time we flew the vehicle, it was autonomous. This time we're flying it with people, and we're going to really check that interface between the human element and the vehicle itself. And so we're going to be relying on a lot of that feedback on any future modifications that we want to go make.
And I'll add I would say there's not major changes we're really planning for Starliner 1. We'll continue to upgrade the vehicle. Boeing has plans to do various upgrades. And one of the things we're going to put in place on Starliner 1 is a little bit better capability for landing in winds. So they've got an upgrade to some of the structure that holds the airbags on Starliner, and that's planned for Starliner 1. But there's the other upgrade I would say is Starliner today can dock to the forward port of the International Space Station. Long term, if you just think about what we just did, right? We moved a spacecraft Dragon from the forward port to the zenith port to accommodate Starliner. For Starliner 1, we'll have the capability to dock at the zenith port, undock from the zenith port, and to also do the port relocate operation. So that's a big upgrade planned in the software. And if you remember what we did back 4 years ago was basically the same thing with Dragon. Demo 2 could only go to the forward port, and then for Crew 1 and subsequent flights, we had the capability to go to either port. So that's the other big piece of software and modifications to the GNC system that we'll have in place.
Thank you both. Okay, we have Micah Maidenberg, Wall Street Journal, on the phone.
Hey, thanks a lot. Steve or Mark, could you talk about preparing for any potential contingencies that may come up during the mission and how Boeing and NASA will be kind of communicating about those and decision making? Thanks a lot.
So I think it's probably twofold. The first is the team that's actually executing the mission. And they train and train and train and train for these contingencies. And they're just well experienced to react to them. So we let them react to them. And we rely on the feedback out of our mission director and Steve's operations manager to give us the information that we need in case we need to help them or we need to communicate across the industry or communicate out. So we have contingency plans in place so that, number one, we're executing them inside our programs and inside our companies, and number two, we're executing across NASA and ULA if necessary.
Yeah, and I would add that really it's been really, even for the long haul, ever since the contract was awarded, about teamwork. And if you step back, the flight control team has flight rules and procedures. The crew has procedures in place for many contingencies. If a piece of hardware fails, then they can use the backup hardware. That's all well practiced, as Mark said. They go through simulations and train and understand those flight rules. It's much like we had for Space Shuttle. And then we have a management team in place, a Starliner mission management team, just like we had for Space Shuttle, where if there was something outside the flight rules or the procedures that we needed to do on the mission, that comes to this forum, which we have on a regular basis, and then the NASA team can weigh in. NASA will be following along the flight step by step. We have people in the control center. We understand the systems. We want to do that to help with crew safety, but also our ultimate goal is to certify this vehicle, for the 6-month increment missions that we'll fly later on. And so we'll have people in place and working side by side with Mark's team. And we've prepared and trained and gone through simulations, and we'll work through anything that comes up.
All right, just a reminder again, if you're on the phone, hit *1 to get into the question queue. But right now, I just want to open up the floor here. Is there anyone with questions? We'll take the one here in the front. If, we can get a mic to him.
Partners, including